So it looks like I'm about to get it going here. I'm going to be able to do a YouTube live since the Facebook live didn't do so well last time. So it looks like I got a YouTube live, which I'll also post that link over on our Facebook site, so that way we can get more participants than just the 10 people here.
Yeah, and can you post it on the chat, because I have a couple of people I was gonna send it to.
Sure. All right. So there's your in the chat box. If you look at it, that's the link for the YouTube live. If you want to share that. All right, let's get going. And so welcome everybody that's joining us either on the Zoom meeting or Facebook or especially the YouTube live. And we are hosting and trying something new with all this quarantine going on and this pandemic. So thank you for joining us. And my name is Drew Degner. I am the San Juan County Chairman. And so with this that we're trying is Zoom. So please be patient with us. And so this is for the candidates for CD3 as well as the U.S. Senate seat. And this is a GOP. So we have most of the candidates. I know Karen, since she's off on the reservation, she is not able to connect due to not so good internet quality out there. And so you can check her out on Facebook. But I think for the most part, we have all the other candidates here today. Is that correct? We got Gavin, all the Senate seats, 3. Yep. So I think the only one we're missing is Karen. So we'll start off, guys. Thank you for joining us again, and gals. And so if you, we don't have Elise either. Didn't hear from her. So Elise is running for Senate, Elise Martinez. So you can check her out too and see why she wasn't on the video. Maybe she's doing something important. But otherwise, we do have, so we'll start going on that. And we'll start with the CD3 candidates. So we don't have a whole lot of candidates, so try to keep it around the 5-minute mark. I'll raise my hand. Can you see my video, everybody? Of course, I have y'all muted, so you can shake your heads if you can hear me. And so when you have 1 minute left, I'll put just a 1 up, and that way that gives you the 1 minute warning. And then I know we do have some people here, and I'll keep watching YouTube and and see if we get some questions on people on those venues. So with that being said, ladies first, Alexis, why don't you go ahead and open us up and kick us off here?
Okay, great. Thank you, Drew. I just want to thank you for everyone for joining us, and I'm looking forward to representing our collective voice here in New Mexico. We are going through some very challenging times. So basically what I want to do is introduce myself. Some of you already know me and others have never met me. So like I said, my name is Alexis Martinez Johnson. I was born in Portales there in southeastern New Mexico. I was raised in Roswell. I went to school there. I ended up graduating in Las Cruces at Mayfield. And then I went out to school in Nashville, Tennessee at Vanderbilt University. And I was raised by my grandparents. And my grandmother, she ended up having Alzheimer's. And so I came back from Nashville, earned an engineering degree there in Socorro at New Mexico Tech. My degree is in environmental engineering. And so I am, I wanted to get into environmental engineering because I wanted to have the beautiful environment for New Mexico that we treasure, such as water for our community, clean air, and all of these. And I feel that this is imperative that a candidate resonates with the New Mexican community here. And then, so I joined the race when I came back to Santa Fe from the Permian Basin, where I worked in the oil and gas industry. I saw the inundation of a lot of far left policies. And right now in these challenging times, we are seeing repercussions of those ideologies. And that is why I'm running. I'm running to make sure that our New Mexican values are heard. And, I'm a native New Mexican, born and raised here, and I want to be the voice that is not being heard. So I am a very pro-life candidate. I had children born at 30, 31 weeks of life. And so that is one of the reasons I'm running. And another main reason why I am running is for that Second Amendment. I was the only one here in Santa Fe that has pushed back against, gun grabbing policies. And several months ago, I went into the Santa Fe New Mexican and I opposed the assault on our Second Amendment, which we are seeing right now in this crisis. And so that and the pro-life measure is why I'm running. I have traditional New Mexican values, and I am here to represent the community that is not being heard in New Mexico. And so that's a little bit about me. And if you have any questions or concerns, comments, please contact me. It's Alexis Johnson, NM. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'm also having a daily town hall at 6 p.m. on Facebook Live. So you're welcome even to give me a phone call. My number is 505-427-2071. And during these times, as candidates, it's difficult to campaign, but we are concerned about our families and our future. And this is why we're here having this discussion right now. So you'll hear a lot of people saying, oh, I don't know about candidates campaigning. We are campaigning, and that means we are fighting for the values and rights of our future, of our American values. And I stand on our Constitution, and I, promote our education, our children, and a reduction in crime. And right now we're seeing a lot of policies being brought about that definitely are controlling us. And we're in a time that I have never experienced. I know my grandparents have, but I would like to come together with the other candidates, irrespective of party, and promote the future, our day-to-day life, and the positivity that we can come out of this tragedy that we've faced as Americans. So I'm looking forward to coming up with solutions. My background is in problem solving. So I'm here to get the job done and problem solve and work for New Mexicans. And I thank you for your time and joining me. So thank you.
Thanks, Alexis. Yeah. Any questions there for Alexis? We'll probably have some questions more afterwards too, and we can ask all the candidates if we don't have any right now. Candidates, if you also want to put your information in the chat box, hopefully you can maybe also pull open a window for the YouTube channel as well, or our Facebook page, and also put in your information on that as well. Other than that, Harry, are you ready to go there, sir? Oops.
Can you hear me okay?
There you go. You're all set there,
You hear me
Harry.
okay there? Okay. All right. Thank you, Drew. I really appreciate this opportunity to address the people out there. And just introduction, my name is Harry Montoya, and I am a candidate for the U.S. Congressional House seat in District 3. A few developments since the pre-primary, since we won that particular pre-primary convention. One of the candidates that was in there, Anise Golden Morper, has endorsed my candidacy, which has been truly a privilege and an honor to have her on board with our campaign. Also, I received the endorsement of the former U.S. Senate candidate, Mick Rich. So I'm honored to have both of them helping out with our campaign as we move forward. Like most Republicans, you know, I'm pro-life, pro-gun, pro-business, and a constitutional conservative. You know, I've been born and raised here in Congressional District 3. I'm a multi-generation native New Mexican. We, with my wife, Doris, and I, raising our family here because we love New Mexico. I've been a member of the Knights of Columbus for about 25 years. One of the main principles of our organization is that of patriotism, and that's certainly one of the things that has motivated me to run is the need to bring back the love of our country and bring back God in our country as well. I've been elected twice to the Santa Fe County Commission. I served on the Tobacco School Board for 8 years, and I've really dedicated my life to serving in this order: my God, my family, and my community. And I have fought for the traditional New Mexican values that are important to all of us, and I will continue to do so as your next congressman. And like Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, I am a former Democrat who walked away from the party that governs against the will of the people. Instead of representing the interests of average Americans, they tend to work for Hollywood, Planned Parenthood, and the ACLU. And I want to work with President Trump to implement conservative answers to the important issues that face our nation, such as immigration, healthcare, education. And I will work for conservative answers to jobs and the economy here in New Mexico. And I am the candidate that you can trust to defeat the eventual Democrat nominee. I'm well known to Democrats and Republicans alike, and I have their confidence, winning multiple elections in North Central New Mexico and serving for 16 years. You know, it's out-of-state interests have really bought and sold this congressional district for way too many years. And now I see as the time for Republicans and moderate Democrats to stand together and elect someone who lives and respects traditional New Mexican values. I believe and I know that I can win critical votes in tough places like Santa Fe, Espanola, Taos, Las Vegas, and the Pueblos. So, you know, I say to all of our fellow Republicans, moderate Democrats, independents, let's stop playing for halftime. Let's fight to win the game now. So, you know, when I talk about traditional values, I'm talking about protecting our faith, our families, our freedom, protecting our land and our water, protecting the forests and the environment, protecting our farmers and ranchers, and like I mentioned earlier, strengthening the economy, and then promoting education in our diverse culture as well. So for these reasons, I am running for this seat, and I would respectfully ask for your vote and would be honored to serve you as your next congressman. So I want to thank you all. God bless you all during these trying times. I've been posting updates on our Facebook page so that people are aware of the different things that are going on in terms of, you know, the closing of the schools, overall budget that was just passed as part of the CARES Act. And that way, at least people are aware that there are sources. And I know that a lot of you all are doing the same thing in terms of keeping people informed. So again, God bless you all, and God bless our great state of New Mexico and the United States of America.
All right. Thanks, Harry.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Harry?
I have a question. I get a lot of my followers asking actually 2 questions, Harry. Number 1, how are we to believe that somebody that just turned from a Democrat to Republican in April of last year and hasn't proven himself as a Republican, that you're not a rhino? And number 2, how do you believe you can win as a Republican when you tried twice and couldn't win as a Democrat?
Okay. First of all, in terms of not being a rhino, I don't think being a party as much as a person has to do with what your morals and principles are. My morals and principles have always been conservative, even though I was a registered Democrat. The fact that I've always been pro-life, I've always been pro-Second Amendment, I've always been pro-business, and I've always been a constitutional conservative. Those are the principles that have defined who I am as an individual. The other thing that is a reality is that if you're living here in Shauna, where are you from?
San Juan.
San Juan
okay.
County.
So living in San Juan County is kind of a converse of living in Santa Fe County. It's almost like if you're going to run in Santa Fe County and win as an elected official, you're going to do it in the Democrat primary. And that's somewhat analogous to what occurs in San Juan County. If you're running there, you pretty much have to be a Republican if you're going to want to attempt to serve in office, in elected office. So, to me, a Democrat is a name only, as is a Republican. It's more what defines the individual in terms of how they have been throughout their lives. Throughout my life, I've been as I described. And then the second question, how can I win since I've only been a Republican for 1 year? Was that?
No, it was,
that the question?
I'm getting the question of how do you think you could win as Republican if you lost twice as a Democrat when you ran against Lujan?
Okay, so the time that I ran as a Democrat against Lujan, I ran against what is the Democrat political machine. When you run against the Democrat political machine, they have defined who already is going to be, in a sense, their candidate. And I think you've already seen that in this year's pre-primary convention in terms of who their anointed one, so to speak, is. And when I ran, I ran the same reason that I'm running now, in the beliefs that our country needs to head in the right direction. Running as a pro-life Democrat is almost right now, the Democrat National Committee is that's taboo. You do not run as a pro-life Democrat. You're just out of the ballgame completely. So any pro-life Democrat wanting to run and serve their country will not be accepted into the political elite club that the Democrat Party espouses. So having lost 2 elections, I don't think defines whether or not I'm able to win this race as a Republican or not. I think what it does do is it brings the people that were loyal to me in both of those races into the fold, and those were moderate Democrats. We are not going to win this race with Republican votes alone. We need to win this race with moderate Democrats. And that's why I believe that I am the candidate and bring those moderate Democrats and the Republican voters into the fold so that we can win this race and turn this seat red.
All right, thanks, Harry. Had a couple questions from Joe for both CD3 candidates. And Joe, you're probably gonna have to turn on your mic. I'm not sure who Thomas is. It's what are your thoughts on Thomas? Joe,
Let me go back over that. I'm talking about Congressman Massey, Thomas Massey.
Right.
He was
Okay.
the one that pushed the getting away from the voice vote in Congress.
I think any holdup right now by the Kentucky congressman is a travesty, because you are having families right now that don't know if they're going to be employed or are unemployed right now. So any holdup to moving forward is an impediment for our New Mexicans and Americans. So I am not in agreement with holding up any type of stimulus that we need to get out the door to Americans right now. Joe, right? Is that Joe?
Yep.
Okay. So I oppose any holdup.
I agree with that as well. I agree with that as well.
So that's including being loaded with a bunch of social issues or pork as well?
Well, I
That would be a yes or
100%
a no.
oppose those, Planned Parenthood, funding for arts and everything like this. I think that our stimulus needs to be targeted and temporary. So what you've seen from the far left is an introduction of unnecessary, what you've just said as pork. And I 100% oppose that. But we also need to come together and go forward. And as you've seen, our Republican senators and most Congress have come together to go forward. So whatever we need to do to come forward, we will, but we have to make sure that that's not completely wiping out what we stand for in our Constitution. So we have to, unfortunately, we have to make concessions here, and I'm hoping that those aren't to the extreme extent.
Harry, you have anything else to add?
Yeah, no, I would agree that the pork, for me, the thing that came out of this was the initial pork that was in there included funding for Planned Parenthood. And when you're involved in the legislative process and you're involved in getting bills and legislation passed that you want, there has to be some give and take. And unfortunately, no bill, no legislation is ever perfect. This is certainly an example of that, but I think in terms of needing to address the needs of the people and what we need, and especially with small businesses, the thing that I think people need to realize is, especially some of the commentaries I see out there, is these are loans. They are 0% loans that are being provided for small businesses and for corporations. And this is being billed by the other side as a corporate bailout, which is totally false. So this is an example of a bill that's not perfect, but hopefully the oversight and the implementation, there's going to be a lot of checks and balances to make sure that that funding is spent appropriately.
Okay, I have a question from YouTube from Steve from Taos. It says, please give your approach to reducing the national debt as a congressman. And whoever wants to start us off.
Well, right now we are in unprecedented times. I am a fiscal conservative, but we are seeing that we are being challenged in a warlike state. And, approaching it from that mentality, we have to do something so that we continue forward movements. So, this stimulus package is, as a conservative Republican, it's very difficult for me to see, but as a small business owner, we have had to make layoffs in the oil and gas industry, and we will continue to make layoffs. And we are literally seeing this reverberate into the community. So we have to, at this time, it's very challenging. We have to help our community, help the children, the parents that are in need right now, that do not have employment and that have applied for unemployment. So out of this situation, I'm a fiscal conservative, but we cannot have chaos and looting in our streets and have millions out of work. This is unprecedented. So we're going to have to work together. I think a targeted and temporary assistance is okay until we, as Americans, can get through this pandemic.
And I would approach it. I would approach it from the standpoint of what are we already spending in terms of foreign aid? There's a ton of money that we're spending on foreign aid that we need to look at bringing back into this country. There's a lot of manufacturing jobs that have been exported over the last 20, 30 years that need to be brought back into this country. And I think a perfect example of that right now is the pharmaceuticals and even the manufacturing of the ventilators that the president wants GM to start doing right now. So what's the unnecessary foreign aid, foreign spending that we're having going out there? What are the programs in here? And the example has already been brought up in terms of spending for the arts and wanting to spend for fuel emissions and all these programs that quite frankly have nothing to do with the safety and well-being of all Americans. So what is the unnecessary spending that's going into education, that's going for healthcare? How can healthcare be more efficiently and effectively incorporated into our communities, into our states? So there's a lot of things that need to be looked at, and it's not an easy fix. And the unfortunate reality right now in terms of decreasing the national debt is we're probably not going to see it in most of the people that are on this phone call or on this chat. It's probably not going to be in our lifetime, but what we can do and what I have done in terms of previous duty as an elected official is look at the long term. And the long term, you may have to implement certain cuts, certain programs that need to be eliminated, but it's for the long-term good of our country.
All right, thanks, Alexis and Harry. Let's move on. We'll probably have some more questions.
Thank you, Drew.
Getting back, and so let's move on to the Senate candidates. Again, let's do 5 minutes. If you can see my video, I'll put the timer up or give you a 1 minute warning. Let's start with Mark. Are you there? Mark?
I'm here, yes.
All right, Mark, if you want to lead us off on the Senate race.
You bet. So you guys, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Mark Ronchetti. I got into this race in the beginning of January. And part of the reason we waited as long as we did, or waited to get into politics as long as we did, is we eventually got to the point, my wife and I, where we felt like if we didn't jump in now and we didn't try to do something at this point, we may lose this state to a far left leadership. Now, I don't think we're a far left state. I think many of you who know this state know that there are a lot of people, no matter what their political backgrounds are, that are pretty conservative in their beliefs here and their belief in family and their really New Mexican values. So we got to a point where we decided that we wanted to do the best we could to try to step up and do something in this. Now, we thought about running for a seat. We thought about running for CD1 about 6 years ago against Michelle. Eventually decided not to do that because our girls were so young. And so I just kept working for Channel 13. We've been involved in causes quietly, but part of my job was to do the best job we could with gathering a large audience across the state. So that's where my focus was. Sometimes I get approached with, hey, what can we do politically and what have you done politically? And we've definitely done things behind the scenes here, but with my job in that particular case, it didn't allow for as much of a political profile as it did just trying to kind of invest in this state. And that's what we've been able to do. So at this point, with this campaign, what we're trying to do here is give voice to people, especially across the state, who have these conservative New Mexico values that at this point are being pushed aside by the far left here. And I think this particular crisis that we're in right now is a good example. If you look at how politicized it's become with this whole thing, this is now turned into a tool to go after the administration, to go after all sorts of different portions of government. Heck, even people within states are going after each other for this. So this just shows you the mood of really the overall political climate here. And that's one of the real concerns. So what we're going to try to do is get everybody together here, know that conservative principles can be a very important part of what we're going to do here. And that's something we think is important. And we talk about that. We talk about smaller government and we talk about more freedom for people. But this situation we're in is very serious in the respect that this is the kind of opportunity that people who love big government are going to try to take advantage of. They're going to try to expand the role of government, to expand government's reach into your life. And when the crisis abates, they don't want to pull the government back. And so that's one thing I would just watch very closely for here. And that is that we need to be vigilant in that the steps that we take to help this crisis have to be steps that are temporary and that are pulled back and allow people to hold on to the freedoms that they appreciate here. Because we know when you start applying these bigger overarching government programs, they're very difficult to pull back at times. And I know there was some real battle back and forth between the left and especially in the Senate, when the bill was in the Senate, the far left, and even Nancy Pelosi in the House was trying to add things in to that bill that had nothing to do with it, portions of the Green New Deal, things like that. So these are things that we as Republicans right now, it's difficult to say, what are you going to do to pull back the deficit right now or the debt right now? That's a tough conversation to have. But what is not a tough conversation to have is the one where we say we are not going to allow some of this government overreach to be a permanent part of our lives. And I think that's something to be very, very careful about here right now. And that's something we're going to make a priority in this campaign. And that is making sure that whatever is done on a temporary basis to help businesses, to help people, especially workers who need that help to get them through this particular time. And then if we can do that, then we can get ourselves in a situation where we can pull government back and look for very big growth. But I think at this point, growth is going to be what's going to help us going forward here. That's what we're going to talk about. But one other just kind of overarching thing that got us involved in this campaign was two things in this state that I think we don't always handle correctly. And I think we've seen the far left in this state really hurt us in education and in crime. And I think those are two big things that are a big deal. And that also gets into the border as well. But one quick thing on education that's been kind of scary to us here, especially when you look at how the Albuquerque area has handled what's going on with the kids, is all of you guys know, kids are out of school for the rest of the year here. The Albuquerque public schools do not have a remote learning system in place. It's been 2 weeks since the kids have been out of school. There is not a plan that's been implemented. School districts in Valencia County, school districts across southeastern New Mexico, school districts even up in Sandoval County already have the kids that are doing the remote learning. They're not doing it in the largest school district in the state. That's unconscionable. And we have to stop letting the far left take this education and especially the poor job that's been done with education and let them continue to inflict that on our kids. It's our job to step up and make sure that does not continue to happen. And of course, as we look at crime across the area here too, it's one of those things that has skyrocketed and it's continuing to be a huge issue. That's another issue we need to jump on here across the board as Republicans to say we need to be the state that is much more friendly to law enforcement and the work that they need to do, because I think they're fighting an uphill battle far too often here. So those are a few of the issues that we looked at. I'm sorry, guys, it's a little bit rambling. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's a few of the issues that got us involved in this campaign and a few of the issues I think that are standing in front of us right now.
All right. Thanks, Mark. I had a question from Steve. Did you want to ask that or you want me to ask that? I'll ask that. So it's it says, Mark, I'm concerned with big government. Nothing's bigger government than Green New Deal. Please give your stance on the Green New Deal. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. I think it's horrendous. And I think what it is going to do is destroy the economy of the state of New Mexico. You know, you talk about banning fracking. That's 40% of the income that comes in here that supports our state. We're already seeing falling oil prices and how those have destroyed the state budget. They've all got to go back to Santa Fe now and redo the whole budget because they overspent to begin with here. So the Green New Deal in and of itself is ludicrous. And actually, you know, I think what's so scary about it is how many different areas of life they're trying to reach into to try to basically determine how you live your life. And I think it's one of the more destructive bills. Also, if you've read it, it's not a serious piece of legislation. And I think that's the real part of this that really is difficult to handle. Now, Ben Ray Lujan, who obviously we're running against in the Senate here, he's a co-sponsor of this, and that's going to be a centerpiece of our campaign. If he gets the opportunity to do what he wants to do with this Green New Deal, you can say goodbye to the economy of the state of New Mexico. His support of that and his signing on to the Green New Deal in and of itself should eliminate him from contention in the Senate. It really should. This is something that is so in direct opposition to the good of the state of New Mexico that I can't even believe he's a co-sponsor for it. But there is no question. Not only do I not support it, it'd be incredibly destructive across the board here, and it would take our way of life and destroy it.
All right. Very good. Thanks, Mark. No more questions at this time. So let's move on to Gavin.
Thanks, Drew. So, Drew, if you can turn on screen sharing for me here real quick. Let's see. Let me go ahead and share the screen. Oops, you disabled screen sharing. So if you could turn mine on.
Yeah, we had somebody trying to jump in there. So let me see if I can. maybe make you the host. Let's see. Sorry. Just one moment.
No worries.
All right, try it now.
There we go. All right, and so here we go. We'll share that one, and then we'll do presentation. All right. So first of all, Drew, thanks so much for letting me participate in this. I'm Dr. Gavin Clarkson, and I am. Many of y'all have heard me talk about how the fact that I'm an endangered species, and Dr. Phil said it best, probably that the best predictor of future behavior is in fact past behavior or relevant past behavior, and with control of the Senate with control of the Senate in the play, President Trump doesn't need another Mitt Romney. What he needs is a battle-tested swamp warrior, somebody who's repeatedly taken on the radical left and won. So if you remember back in 2018, I took on Maggie Toulouse-Oliver in the Supreme Court. Michael Hendricks and I wrote an amicus brief the Supreme Court used to turn back straight party voting. I beat Lois Lerner in her IRS assault on the Tea Party and on Indian tribes. I took on Elizabeth Warren's CFPB and beat them. I'm a lifelong pro-lifer, and I even chaired a crisis pregnancy center while I was in grad school at Harvard. But importantly, I was hired by President Trump to clean up the swamp mess in Indian Affairs and the Department of Interior. And of course, for that, I was maliciously smeared by the Soros-backed fake news and the Jeff Bezos's flying monkeys of fake news. But I'm the only candidate that was hired by Trump and then fired by radical Marxists. I support the president's trade policy against China, and I did so back when everybody in New Mexico seemed to be rather silent. And I'm the only battle-tested swamp warrior in this race, and I'm the only one that President Trump can count on when it's time to take on China. And so that's one of the things I want to focus on. I posted it over the chat over there on the right, but China is going to be one of the major campaign issues, because clearly our economy has been devastated by China, and the coronavirus has absolutely devastated New Mexico's capability. New Mexico's our economy is shut down. It's interesting that the governor shut down the gun shops, but she left open the abortion clinics. But the policy we announced on Wednesday, when President Trump declared an emergency, that opened up a broad set of powers. And step one of our Frack China strategy is to confiscate $1.1 trillion of U.S. Treasury bonds that are held by Communist China. The video, last I checked, it was more than 108,000 views so far just in the last 2 days. And it's a strategy. It's buried deep in the National Emergencies Act, but because I have a law degree, I can sit around and read the National Emergencies Act. And it's a very specific mechanism. We used it in 1979 to go after Iran when they took our embassy and held our fellow citizens hostage. But part of this is also there are mechanisms where we can enlist our international allies to also target China. But one of the things we've discovered in this coronavirus episode is that much of our manufacturing, and particularly our critical supply chains, are now totally taken over by China, and we must repatriate that manufacturing and supply chain back to the United States, particularly for our pharmaceuticals and our medical supplies. But one of the things that I did when I was in the Trump administration, I was part of the team that identified all the critical minerals that exist in the ground in New Mexico that we're dependent on China for. And so we have to pull back or reinvigorate our mining capabilities here in New Mexico, which has obviously been under assault from the radical left, because so many of those critical minerals are from China, but they exist here in New Mexico. And mining jobs are good jobs. I mean, mining is one of the few things where you can walk out of high school with just the labor in your hands, go to work in the mines, and then graduate, or then you end up retiring as a senior executive, and you've watched your grandchildren grow up in your own hometown. But part of that is also we have to restructure higher ed here in New Mexico. We have to have an increased emphasis on skilled trades, because everybody needs people who can build and fix and make and raise and grow things. We need to stop the Confucius institutes that are on campus that are basically propaganda arms of the Communist Chinese government. And you know, for lack of a better term, we need to give higher education an academic enema and get rid of all of these degrees and useless classes that don't contribute to New Mexico's economy and focus on the things that do. So as I said, I'm a battle-tested swamp warrior, and President Trump can count on me to take on communist China, standing side by side with him. And I do have the energy to empower New Mexico, and I'm asking for your vote. And that should have been 5 minutes. Did I do it, Drew?
You're 5 seconds. There you go.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks so much.
All right.
And that was a good way to hold the little stopwatch up. That was actually really helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad you could see it because I couldn't see it. So awesome. So, hey, this is a great learning curve for all of us, and I'm glad we can do this. Is there any other questions for Gavin or any other candidates?
So, Drew, I do have a question for the candidates for Senate. So when the Constitution was first written, there was a difference between a representative in the House and a senator in the Senate. How do you see your role different than what a representative's role is in the House?
Well, I'll jump in with that one. One of the biggest differences in the U.S. Senate versus the House is the Senate has the Senate deals with confirmation of Supreme Court justices and federal justices. And one of the things that this president's greatest impact, and then probably the longest lasting impact, is the restructuring of the federal judiciary. Because I do have a law degree, it's highly likely that I will end up on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Actually, it turns out President Trump elevated my high school debate partner to the voice in the Senate Judiciary Committee when it's time to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg with a justice like Amy Coney Barrett. I mean, that's a huge impact, and that's something that I think I will have a good opportunity to contribute on, because that's a unique role for the Senate.
Mark, I think you're muted.
Hold on, Mark. You're still muted there, buddy. Not hearing you.
Sorry about that. I was
swearing
there. It does automatically put me out. No, I agree with Gavin on the confirmation portion of this. And Mitch McConnell has been very good about getting President Trump's not only judges through, but obviously the 2 Supreme Court justices as well. That's a critical part of this. But a critical part of this, too, is representing the whole state of New Mexico. And I think that for too long, we've had senators who don't represent this state. And we've had senators who represent enclaves in this state, places like Santa Fe and portions of the Albuquerque area, but they don't represent Southern New Mexico. If you go across Southern New Mexico and even up into the Four Corners, it's the same thing. You've seen people who just flat out don't take into account this whole state. So we have an obligation to represent the whole state. And I think that's a critical part of this. It's also a critical part of rebuilding the party in this state as well. We have to have a statewide office holder who can help rebuild this party and bring conservative values back across the state as well.
If I can there, Steve, I just wanted to comment on that. You're asking about the difference between your Senate and your representative. And where are you from, Steve?
I'm up in Taos.
Okay, Taos. Well, what you're seeing as far as your Senate candidates, they serve a longer term, and they can represent your rural voice, which is often forgotten. And that is one area that I represent, as your next congresswoman. But your Senate candidates will be able to represent that rural voice that, a lot of your representatives are chosen based on the population. And so that's why you're seeing these urban centers. A lot of them have very far left views. So our Senate is the voice of those forgotten or unheard voices, such as here in New Mexico in our District 3. And so that's one difference, is those rural voices also need to be in line with the city centers. And so that is one reason why there's a difference between your Senate and your congressional candidates, to represent all of the people of New Mexico and the United States. Thank you.
So let's go back to Gavin and let you have an opportunity for the Green New Deal question. And that's, if you want to answer that one, Gavin.
Okay. Well, so Mark had an answer for the Green New Deal, and he and I both vehemently oppose the Green New Deal. I think I think Mark and I do have a bit of a difference of opinion. And again, I'm trying to run this. I think both Mark and I are trying to maintain a respect for each other, and so we're not going after each other personally. But where there are policy differences, I think that's appropriate to highlight. My position on climate change, obviously, the Green New Deal would be a disaster for New Mexico. But I think we definitely take a different position on climate change. I'll give you an example here. When I was working for President Trump, one of the things I did was I actually supervised the only healthy forest in New Mexico. I use this as I keep this picture on my phone because it basically, this was the Mescalero Apaches forest right next to the Lincoln National Forest. And my position is that climate change does not cause droughts and forest fires. It's bad forest management that cause droughts and forest fires. Because if you look at the Lincoln National Forest, that's fuel for the next super fire. And every single one of those adult trees aspirates 100 gallons of water into the air every day. If we actually had healthy forests in New Mexico, we would have enough water for agriculture, for mining, for municipalities, even for all the solar farms that people want to put up to keep them cool. So that's a difference that I think it's a policy difference, and my position is that climate change doesn't cause the forest fires and the drought, that it's much more bad forest management in New Mexico. And I had the experience of supervising the only healthy forest in New Mexico. But Mark is right. The Green New Deal is a disaster. But I think I go a step farther and say the president was absolutely right to pull out of the Paris Climate Accords, because the climate change agenda itself is a disaster, and that's something I'm very eager to fight against in the United States Senate. Because I think if we destroy we've already destroyed the forest industry. We've already, other than except for at Mescalero, but we've also, where the mining industry is under assault, the coal industry is under assault, oil and gas is under assault, and it's the climate change agenda that's driving those assaults, and we've got to stop that.
Yeah, you want me to? Can I jump in?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, a couple of things. I think, Gavin, we don't disagree on the Paris Climate Accords either. You're exactly right. And part of the problem with what happened with Paris Climate Accords is that you had standards that we were going to be held to, that countries like China and India were not going to be held to. So you're exactly right. The president was right to pull out of that. And as far as the forests go, we've talked about this. And if you go to our Facebook page, we were actually up in the Northern Mountains last week talking about the clearing of the forest and how critical it is for our logging industry to have the opportunity to clear these forests as well. Because if you just leave the forest, you're right, you do end up with much more of an explosive situation there as far as what happens with these forest fires goes. And if you go up into the Northern Mountains, you see it all the time. And that's one of the things we were referencing. So you're more than welcome to go to our Facebook page and check that out. There's a lot of these things that aren't about the environment. It's not about the environment with the left with this. It is about determining what's going to happen with your life. And I think that's the part of this that's most difficult to take.
Well, and Mark, if that's your position now, I'm glad you changed your position, because that's not the position you took when you were speaking at a climate change conference where you said on the record that climate change causes forest fires and drought. And now, again, I'm going off of what was printed, what printed in the media before you were a candidate. If that's if you've changed your position now, that's great. I think you're taking the correct position.
Sure. But Gavin, you're the same person who understands that people say things and take things out of context, and they throw it just because it's written on a page on the internet about you, Gavin, doesn't mean it's true. And I know you know that as well as anyone.
Oh, absolutely. But if it's in a printed newspaper, I mean, did you say that climate change causes drought and forest fire? If that was wrong, then you should ask that newspaper to print a retraction.
It's absolute no. I mean, fires aren't caused by anything other than a spark or a lightning strike. I mean, climate change doesn't cause fires. Come on.
Again, I'm just going off of what the newspaper reported, your direct quote from you. So if they got it wrong, they got it. Trust me, you are absolutely correct. I have seen the newspapers get plenty of things wrong. And so if your position is, if that wasn't an accurate reflection of your position, then you should encourage that newspaper to print it to correct the statement, because they attributed to you a statement where you said in a public forum at a climate change conference that climate change was responsible for droughts and forest fires. I don't think that's true. And if you don't think that's true, I think you should get them to correct that.
Yeah, Gavin, we've talked about very clearly where our position is. And again, you know as well as anybody, there's stuff that is all over the internet that's said about people that's just very difficult to take. And I know you know that.
Oh, yes, I do. You know, the fake news is quite annoying. You certainly learned that serving in the Trump administration.
All right. Thank you both. So if you guys have like video content that you need to share or would like to share, because with all this quarantine, even being contested, we're going to share on our Facebook page on anything else, but you got to send that to me direct or directly to our Facebook page, and trying to look for the video content more than just a post. So if you guys have that and would like for us to share, just send that directly to our Facebook page, or if you have me, send it directly to myself and we'll get that posted. I want to get all of our candidates as much exposure during this time where it's quarantine. So I want Republicans to win. So I'm good with any of you. You're better than the other side by far. And so I want to get you guys exposed as much as possible.
Well,
Mark, if
Drew,
you would also put down in your information on the chat side, and I got everybody else's Facebook page and website. If you want to make a comment, and I'll share that on the YouTube page, if you would do that for me. I'd appreciate that. We're going to wrap up here, keep this right at an hour. So 2 more minutes. Any final questions?
Oh, well, one thing, Drew, I wanted to make sure that I think Mark and I both have agreed that either one of us would be better than Ben Ray Lujan. And I think either one of us will, I mean, I thoroughly anticipate, I plan on beating Mark, but, if for some reason it doesn't work out that way, Mark will have my full throated support. And I'm assuming that he's willing to say the same thing, because the biggest disaster for New Mexico in the Senate would be have Ben Ray Lujan. So, we have got to make sure that we're going to have an active primary here, focusing on issues. Once the primary is done, we need to unify behind our nominee and go full-throated together to make sure that we flip this open U.S. Senate seat over to the Republicans.
You got it. You got a rebuttal of that, Mark?
I completely agree. There's no question. I will fully support whoever the nominee is, and if that's Gavin, I would be happy to do that. There's no doubt about it. I think we all understand the challenge that's in front of us, and that challenge is not going to be easy. There's no doubt about it. We've all got to be on the same page, no doubt.
All right, sounds good. Congress candidates, anything else you would like to add before we wrap up here?
I would just like to say thank you, everyone, for your time and joining us here on your weekend. It's been a pleasure, and I just am asking for your vote for the Congressional District 3, Alexis Martinez Johnson, and I thank you and have a blessed day.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and share the YouTube link as much as you can. And we'll continue trying to do things like this and trying to get you guys exposed as much as possible and as much exposure. So hopefully next time we'll have a little bit more notice and advertisement to get this out there. So thanks again, guys. Stay safe in this nice quarantine. One final thought. I told this to the other ones. I know Gavin. So did you guys hear about the toilet paper stock? Did you guys hear about that one? No? It was all wiped out.
Oh my gosh. I'm never doing this again.
One last dad joke before it all ends. So again, you guys have a good one. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much, Drew. Thanks for putting this on.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, you guys. Sorry I missed it. I just got back on. Drew, are you still there?
Yeah, let me end things here and.
Okay. Gosh, there were so